bringing you the latest in tax credit news, insight, and analysis. This is Tax Credit Tuesday with your host, Michael Novogradac.
Hello, I'm Michael Novogradac, and this is Tax Credit Tuesday. This is the February 27th, 2024 podcast. I'm pleased to have back this week as my guests, Novogradac partners Amanda Reed and Brent Parker. They are two of Novogradac's leading experts on the Capital Magnet Fund, which is the topic of today's discussion. What a coincidence. Opening of the 2024 round, the Capital Magnet Fund was announced earlier this month. Applicants will be competing for nearly $250 million in available funds in the 2024 round. Now, the cash awards are generally used to fund the development, renovation, and preservation of affordable rural housing and homeownership. The cash awards are made to community development financial institutions and qualified nonprofit housing groups. Now, I note that for-profit housing developers can also apply if they are a certified community development financial institution or CDFI. We'll talk more about that in today's episode. Now, last year, 52 organizations received an award from the 2023 round, about a third of the total number of applicants. Now, awards in recent years have typically landed in the $5 to $7 million range. Now, this year's round is smaller than the last 2 years, yet it's still nearly double the $131 million that was available in 2019. Now, the Capital Magnet Fund award competition is very, very competitive. So please stay tuned to the discussion to hear how you can get an edge. Now, if you haven't applied before, there is no better time than now. While each year does bring many repeat winners, each year also brings new awardees. This podcast is aimed at prior awardees who want to continue to improve their application, continue to receive awards. The podcast is for those who applied in the past that did not receive an award and are looking for an edge. It's also for those on the fence about whether or not to apply in this round. This podcast is also designed for those who are thinking about applying but really should be applying. I include this last group because I personally am always surprised that more entities aren't applying for the nearly $250 million in cash available. Now, if you're all going to apply, time is of the essence. You can't wait. There are a series of important deadlines, beginning with several coming up March 14th. We will talk more about these deadlines in today's episode as well. Well, you've heard a lot from me, but you really want to hear from my two guests, and we do have a lot to cover. So if you're ready, let's get started. Amanda and Brent, welcome back to Tax Credit Tuesday.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. So it is a pleasure to have you both back on the podcast. It's great to know that this application round has opened up. But before we discuss the topic, I'd like for each of you to share with our listeners some information about the services you provide to Novogradac clients, both with respect to the Capital Magnet Fund application process, as well as more broadly.
Sure. I would say that for the Capital Magnet Fund application, I provide probably two levels of service. The first is a review assistance where the client drafts the application and I'm just really reviewing it, providing comments and feedback based on our knowledge of the application. So that would be the one level. And then for some clients, I do help prepare the application and do more of the heavy drafting of it. Don't do as many of those because they're definitely more time intensive, but I do provide that service as well for some clients if they need help with the drafting side. So I would say that. And then outside of Capital Magnet Fund, I also provide financial statement audit, tax returns, agreed upon procedures, forecasts, kind of run the gamut of all those kinds of things for both new market tax credits and other programs within the CDFI fund. Also doing compliance with programs within the CDFI fund. So various consulting and just about anything a client needs.
Brent.
Yeah, so pretty much the same answer. I work a lot of sort of real estate oriented enterprise with developers and fund sponsors, syndicators, do both levels of service for the Capital Magnet Fund, do all the same fun and exciting CPA stuff that Amanda just referred to.
Including low developing tax credits and opportunity zones?
That's correct.
Very good. Thank you for that. So let's start by giving our viewers and listeners a high level overview of the Capital Magnet Fund. And Amanda, I thought we would start by asking you who can apply for Capital Magnet Funds.
Sure. So there are two types of entities that can apply for capital magnet funds. The first one is a certified CDFI, which stands for Community Development Financial Institutions. And the other one is a nonprofit housing organization with a principal purpose of managing and developing affordable housing. Now, if you want to apply to be, if you are applying under the certified CDFI criteria, you need to have already been certified by the CDFI fund as a CDFI as of the date of the round of the CMF NOFA, which is Notice of Funding Availability, which they always issue when the application opens up. As of the date of that agreement or that notice, you have to have already been certified as a CDFI. So that date was February 15th of 2024. So by that date, you have been certified to go under that criteria, or otherwise the nonprofit housing organization can apply. Oh, and then two other things. Sorry, I have to just think about
Please.
it. All entities, you do have to at least be around, and it is a legally formed entity in existence for 3 years. So just keeping that in mind. And then lastly, the applicant has to have audited financial statements for at least the last two most recent fiscal years. So knowing that those are two other criteria you have to have as well.
So if an entity is not a certified CDFI, not a nonprofit, then they've lost the ability to apply sort of directly this round, but now probably a good time to get certified
Yeah,
so that you're ready next time.
exactly. Exactly.
So thank you for that, Amanda.
And if Mike, just to add in, that's okay. If you have projects that you need funding on, you could also, a lot of my clients will sort of reach out to their nonprofit partners and think that to sort of try and sort of spur on this process.
Oh, thank you for that. So that our audience can better understand the various uses, I thought maybe you could give a high level description of the various uses of capital magnet funds, Brent. And then later in the course of the podcast, we'll get into more of the specific ways in which the application directs resources.
Will do. So recipient of the CMF4 applicant has to sort of plan on and will use their financing to support affordable housing activities, and can also use that to support economic development activities up to 30% of the award, which basically like community service facilities and things like that do also support that affordable housing. To include costs as project costs, the related units have to be leased or owned by families that are 120% AMI, and really to be award priority points, which you have to do in order to be competitive. At least 20% of the units have to be occupied by any combination of low income, very low income, or extremely low income families. The CMF award in leverage proceeds basically has to be used to increase private capital and development, preservation, rehabilitation, and or purchase of affordable housing projects for the populations discussed earlier. And those projects have to be completed within 5 years of the effective date on the assistance agreement in order to include the costs as leverage in your application.
Thank you for that, Brent. I want to follow up with you in a moment about the leverage question. But maybe Amanda, if you could share with our audience what you think they should know, once again at a high level, about the process of applying to be a CDFI.
Sure. So one thing to keep in mind that the application for CDFI certification is always open. So you can apply at any time. It's not like the other applications where there's an open and close period. Last year on October, or I should say October of 22, not last year, but October of 22, the CDFI fund actually paused the certification application and revamped it big time and did a lot of big changes. And so it just kind of opened up again. So now there's a whole new application that you would have to do to get CDFI certified. One of the big changes they did was they now have this abbreviated transaction level report that you do first, and you submit that to them. And if they approve it, then the application actually opens up for you to do. So people keeping that in mind is just getting a good early head start on it. and allowing time, because the CDFI fund is, I'm sure, getting a lot of applications right now. The application just opened up in December again of 23, so they're getting a lot. But I think to be a CDFI, just things to kind of keep in mind at a very high level, they look for criteria such as being a financing entity. They want to make sure you have a primary mission of promoting community development. They want to make sure you're primarily serving one or more target markets, and that you're also providing development services in conjunction with your financing activities. So those are a lot of the criteria as a general overview that they're going to look for in the application to be a CDFI. So that's the application is done inside their software in the AMIS software. But I would always tell people, get going on it now. Like you mentioned, if you're not certified, give yourself time to go get certified now so you're ready to go for next year.
Thank you, man. That's valuable information for the audience. And I also would encourage those that are think maybe they want to become certified to jump on applying for that status now. And I will say it's something to consider, even if you're not planning on applying now. Obviously, you can't apply now. You've already missed the deadline. But if you're not even considering applying next year, there are other reasons to be a certified CDFI. And I won't go into all those reasons in this podcast, but maybe we'll have another podcast. Maybe Amanda will have you and Brent back where we can talk about some of the benefits of being a certified CDFI.
Sure.
But Brent, we've talked about who can apply for capital magnet funds. And I mentioned I wanted to get back to you about the leverage question. There is a minimum leverage factor of tenfold as part of the application process. So if you could describe for our listeners the three approaches laid out in the application for leveraging an award.
Sure. So award recipients, you can use a proceed, as you said, in three different ways. Basically, you can use it either number one to set up what's called an enterprise level, basically loan fund, where you're using proceeds, either your own proceed or proceeds from other sources to leverage that fund, and then the combined fund you use to fund projects. That's the first way to use it. The second way is just use it directly, fund it directly to those projects yourself. Or third way is to then revolve the proceed and use them again. Now you're trying to meet this 10 times leverage factor. And really, to be compelling, you probably need to be in excess of that. So thinking about that, maybe an enterprise leverage loan fund may help you to sort of expand that factor, or like I said, a revolving loan fund. Note though, again, that in order to use the project costs in your leverage calculation, you have to have completed those projects within the 5-year compliance period.
Thank you for that, Brian. Tell me if I have this right. Conceptually, it could be at a loan fund level where you have the grant, and then you have sufficient other funding at the loan level for it to be 10 times, to then go and make loans, invest in eligible activities, we'll talk about in a moment. Secondarily, you could go directly to a project, and that project itself has sufficient other financing to be leveraged 10 times. And or you recycle the money, and each time you recycle it, that recycling counts as additional leverage.
That's right. And the power of, I think, also the enterprise fund is that not only are you counting the proceeds you're leveraging at that level, but also the project. So if you can do 10 projects on your own, but you can finance 20 with the enterprise loan, that just multiplies your power.
For sure.
Great. Thank you for that. So I mentioned eligible activities. So back to you, Amanda, if you want to describe the 6 eligible activities that are outlined as uses or means to getting the capital magnet funds to benefit communities.
Sure. I would also say then, so along with the 6 ways that you can utilize the proceeds, and I'll go over those. And then also, just to let people know, you can also provide this financing to the project at all different phases of the project as well. So they talk about, you can provide it in the beginning as pre-development financing or property site acquisition financing. You could provide it during the construction, bridge, or permanent financing, like during the construction or shortly afterwards. So you can provide it for that. or it can just come in afterwards for like refinancing a loan or providing equity. So it's nice that you can also provide it at all these different phases of a project's life as well. Those are all allowed. And then the six ways that we've been talking about how you can utilize the proceeds are to capitalize loan loss reserves. You're allowed to do that. Another one is to capitalize a revolving loan fund. Another one is to capitalize an affordable housing fund. And this can be revolving, but it's not required to be the affordable one. You can capitalize a fund to support economic development activities. And I think we briefly mentioned that, but the economic development activities can only be up to 30% of your award, but you can use a fund to do that. You can also make risk sharing loans. And then the last one is to provide loan guarantees. So those are the six different ways that you can utilize the proceeds of the CMF award.
Great. Thank you for that. So we have those 6 ways in which the award is creating a debt base, if you will, that can then make its way to particular types of activities. I thought, Brett, maybe you could share with the audience the types of activities that you see capital magnet funds supporting most commonly. Obviously, there's a wide variety of uses, and we're not suggesting the ones most common are the ones everyone should be applying for, but it is useful just to get a sense of the lay of the land, what types of activities the money is most directly supporting.
Sure. And as you mentioned, I mean, you're not required to do it in concert with any particular sort of program or incentive, but and on purpose, I think you see it very often with the low income housing tax credit program. A big factor of CMF program is your affordability level. And so you're required to be at or below, for to count project costs, or below 120% AMI, but priority points are granted if you're lower than that. And really, to maximize your priority points, you have to have at least 45% of your units on an aggregate basis, portfolio wide, for the incentive at or below 50% AMI. So low income housing tax credit LIHTC deals really sort of work well with that from a compliance perspective. And also they're seeking sort of private leverage. So certain things you might think of as possibly being public, like low income housing tax credit equity and loan proceeds, those are actually private sources. So you probably have a fair amount, third to 20% to a third, that are public sources, but you have a lot of private sources in that incentive. So it makes a lot of sense. You have to sort of carve out prior CMF 40. So if you're a continuing and repeating applicant, you have to be wise about your strategy and which projects to use and have a robust pipeline. But certainly once you win an award, it becomes easier to win awards after that, and especially in the LIHTC rate.
Great. Thank you for that. Seems like it's a good way. The local attached to blending with Capital Magna Fund is a good way to make the application score well for winning an award. And then obviously in the low income housing tax credit space, there's always a need for some level of gap financing. So it's a nice marriage of the two. So Amanda, here's going to be maybe the hardest question to try to address in the podcast. And that's to give an overview of what the application entails. There's a lot to it. And the podcast isn't about the complete nuts and bolts of the application process. Listeners can reach out to you and Brent for more of those. But if you could just give a broader sort of overview as to what's all involved in an application.
Sure, no problem. So there are 3 parts to the application. There's a business strategy section or business strategy and leveraging section, I should say. The second one is the community impact section, and the third one is your organization capacity. So obviously, as they sound, your first section, you're kind of going over the strategy that you're going to use the award for and the leveraging information that we've been talking about. Second section, you're going to go more into the community impacts that's going to be created with this award, what you anticipate to create. And the third one is just talking about your organization, the people that's behind it, and who's going to help you deploy the award and maintain the compliance. There are obviously within these questions, there's lots of drop down boxes and checklists that you have to select, but there's also narratives, which are very key. And the big thing too is there's all these appendices in the back, which has tables and stuff, and a lot of your narratives refer to the tables, so they drive the application as well. So it's a lot of track record and pipeline and stuff like that that they want to see in the tables. And then you're going to have narratives that go along with it. So that's pretty much the main app. As you start to do the tables, you have two approaches you can go down. You either go down a financing entity approach, or they have an affordable housing developer manager approach. And so that will dictate what tables you're doing and which ones you're not. But I would say that is, but you're right. It is very time intensive. It sounds like, oh, it's easy, but it's got a lot of questions and it's not. But that's about the big overview of how the app works.
Great. If I could jump in real quick. I just want to also sort of mention that if you're on the fence about applying and you're worried that, hey, I don't have a lot of history or track record in this area, note that all these projects that you're a managing general partner in, if you're a nonprofit, things of that nature, that all sort of gets counted in your track record. So you may be more eligible than.
That's a very good point. Don't self-select yourself out without talking to Brent or Amanda to see if you don't need to be self-selecting yourself out.
For sure.
So I did mention in my introduction, there's a number of rapidly approaching deadlines that listeners will want to be mindful of. So Brent, if you could give an overview of some of the more important ones. It's caveat to our listeners, this is not an exhaustive list, but if you can give an illustrative list, that would be great.
Sure. So there's really 4 important dates that are coming up March 14th by 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. All the times are Eastern. Number 1, your SF 424, which is the very short form where you're giving your information and proposed sort of award. That's due to be submitted at grants.gov. Note that you should make sure you have a grants.gov account and it's active. If you don't, you have to sort of apply to the systems award management, which is a whole process, and it may take weeks. So now if you're considering second organizational account in the AMIS is the award management information system deadline. And so you'll have to sort of open up that account if you haven't before. 2024 Title VI compliance worksheet in AMIS, which Matt's to talk about in a second. And then applicants using a consortium approach are asked to submit a service request in AMIS notifying the Capital Management Fund program of the organization's intent to be part of a consortium. And then 2 important deadlines after at 5 p.m. Eastern time, April 12th, the CDFI stops taking questions. So any questions you have, submit them for that. And then finally, the big application in AMIS is required to be submitted 11:59 Eastern on April 16th. So I'm sure a lot of people were laughing when they were setting up that. There may or may not be other things due to the Treasury on that as well.
Right. Thank you for that, Brent. And then Amanda, maybe you could, for those who have applied before, if you could share maybe a couple of the updates to the application that are new in the 2024 round.
Yeah. Well, the good news is there wasn't really any big changes. So that's the good news. There were some changes to the priorities, which I know Brent, I think, is going to discuss. The main thing I would say to the application that's new this year is that Title VI compliance worksheet that Brent just talked about that needs to be turned in by March 14th. That's a new thing that was not in the prior year app. You did not have to fill that out. So you now have to complete that Title VI compliance worksheet in AMIS by that March 14th deadline. So if you applied in the past, that's a new thing, and not to forget to do that because that's that earlier due date before the app. So you want to make sure you get that in. And then the only other thing I would have brought up is it's not new this round, but it was in the last round, was that consortium approach, which was a new thing last year, which was that basically 2 to 5 eligible applicants can apply under this consortium approach. And when you do that, each consortium member has to meet all the Capital Magnet Fund eligibility requirements on their own, and they each submit an individual application. But the benefit of that is that for certain sections of the Capital Magnet Fund application, they will review you on a combined basis. So for an entity that doesn't maybe have a great track record or have a lot of that, by going under a consortium approach, you get the advantage of getting evaluated combined on some of the areas. The deadline, if you want to do that, though, is that earlier date too, like March, like Brent mentioned, that March 14th. So you'd have to let the CDFI fund know that you're planning on doing that approach by that deadline. So I just thought I'd bring that one up. But other than that, it was just like minor little word changes or clarifications and questions. No big other updates for this round.
Right. Thanks for that. And then now let's get into a little bit of the weeds on how to be competitive. So, Brent, there are priority points as part of the application process. And maybe you could address how optional those priority points are.
Right. So it's, as sort of I previously discussed, in order to maximize your affordability priority points, you at least have 45% or more of your units at or below 50% area median income. And for light tech deals, maybe pretty easy attainable, but that's probably pretty important if you want to try to shoot for that threshold. Aside from that, there are priorities and for projects that are in areas of economic distress or high opportunity areas. They have specific tracks spelled out on the website, and then also rural projects. But you have to sort of be realistic about what you can do in those areas. And because the projects that you're going to put in your application may not be the projects that you fund, it might be a year later by the time you get sort of the proceeds and all of that. So be realistic about those percentages that you put in your application. Those are all important. And then finally, the CFI fund has sort of targeted specific areas that targeted in the past, America Samoa, the Northern Mariana Islands, U.S. Virgin Islands, and Wyoming. So that to the extent you serve those areas and you're on the fence, apply. I mean, apply anyway, but definitely apply because you might top the stack.
Thank you. So I think we've given a good overview, or you and Amanda have given a review of the program and the application process. Now let's discuss a few application tips to making an application stronger. So Amanda, having a consistent strategy or theme does make it much easier for the reader to understand the organization, how they would use the award, and their ability to effectively use the award. Maybe you could discuss that in a little bit more depth in terms of how important it is to have that consistent strategy.
Yes. I think that we have to all remember that there are outside readers that read this application. And so when the strategy or the theme is not consistent throughout, I always tell people, if you confuse the reader, you're just giving them the opportunity to ding you on points here and there. And as we can see, that you don't need to lose many points to probably be out of the winners pool. So a consistent strategy and theme throughout is very, very key. That if you're talking about what you're going to do early on, and then when I'm reading an application, I always let the client know that by the end of it, I want to read the whole app from beginning to end before it's submitted, because it can sound a little disjointed and you don't notice it when you're doing individual questions here and there. But if doing a full read of it, I think it's very key, because the last thing you want to do is confuse the reader. And
Right.
so that's what I'm always trying to figure out and make sure it sounds very easy to understand.
And I know I always like to suggest that someone who hasn't read it yet, read it once you're done,
Yeah.
because they'll catch a lot of things after you've read it enough times. You'll read words where they aren't and things of that nature.
Yeah. And I
And
think a good,
Mhm.
oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, and a good thing too is I always tell clients, especially having me or Brent review it, we're not from the organization, so we are a good unbiased. We don't know the organization, so we're a good set of eyes to look at it and let people know where things aren't making sense. Because sometimes I think, obviously, if you work for the organization, things you're just so entrenched in it, and to have somebody that doesn't know your organization as well as you do reading it as well.
And then Brett, maybe you could discuss something that seems pretty obvious, how important it is to the question asked.
Right. So, I mean, like Amanda said, there are people reading these applications and they have boxes to check and score. So you want to make that as easy for them as possible. The application instructions are very straightforward. They're well done, many years going into it. Answer the questions asked. So they'll say, here's the question, bullet, 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 and then tip, 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 just answer those in that order if possible, direct to the point, and try not to elaborate on your projects are great. And it's good to be excited about your projects, but really stick to the questions.
I always like to suggest that you take the question and rephrase it in the form of an answer.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's one way to make sure that you answer what they're asking. Because even the process of doing that
Yeah.
helps you in your own mind hone your answer,
Yeah.
as opposed to just starting an answer, not taking the question and reframing it in the form of an answer.
Yeah.
So I mentioned different groups of potential applicants in my introduction. I mentioned those who have been successful in the past, but know that every year it gets a little more competitive. So they've got to always be trying to find ways to improve their application. Those that have applied in the past and did not receive an award, as well as those who are thinking about applying and those who aren't thinking about it or probably should be. Maybe you could share some tips, Amanda, for those listeners. Feel free to keep a few in your pocket for them to call you to.
Yeah, no problem. I do think that even if you haven't applied in the past, like you mentioned, or even if you have applied in the past and were unsuccessful, obviously keep applying and consider using someone like us to help tweak your application, make it a little bit stronger. I definitely have helped a lot of clients that have called me and said, I've applied in the past, I haven't been successful, and used us. And then I was able to help them get them over the hurdle. And so I do think reaching out to us, don't give up just because you weren't successful, keep applying, and reaching out to us and getting us to help you is a nice, good third party view of it that we can provide hopefully some good feedback. I obviously think anybody in the affordable housing industry should be applying. I mean, this program marries so well with light tech that if you're working in affordable housing, you absolutely should be applying.
Brent, any tips? I know you have,
Yeah.
so you share.
Yeah. Things like just leading off what Amanda said too, like applied before and this briefing letter that looks like Sanskrit or something to you. We've read a lot of those, so we might be able to derive information from that. So let us know and let's take a look at it. But if you do win, keep in mind that if you win, like the cost to do this is pretty small, but also when you consider that if you win, you're a known party to the CDFI fund and they are very interested in lowering the risk of investment, as you can tell by reading through the application. So winning may very well have a multiplier, not necessarily, but it increases your chances. So you lose once, a lot of entities lose once and possibly twice. And so don't let that stop you from trying again.
Mhm.
So thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Brent. I'll ask each of you to share any parting advice before we bring this to a close.
I get my one would be we're already almost 2 weeks since the app came out. So absolutely get going on this if you haven't started yet. I know I've talked to lots of people, and when the app first comes out, they're like, "Oh, it's 60 days." And I'm like, "You will have no idea how fast 60 days will go by. You will blink and we will be at the deadline day." So don't get too comfortable that those 60 days is like plenty of time to do the app. I would say get started ASAP, reach out to us. We can help you, but that would be my parting tip is get going soon and get ahead of it because time is ticking and time, as you said, is of the essence. So
Yeah, when you print when you print the application from PDF, like over 100 pages. So, you definitely want to get started. It's like a 6-week process, I think, really the drafting and all that and the sections and everything. So definitely just echoing what Amanda said, get started now.
Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Amanda. Thanks for appearing at today's episode to discuss the Capital Magna Fund. And to the listeners, I do encourage if you have any questions about applying for capital magnet funds, please reach out to Brent or Amanda. Also reach out if you have other audit, tax, accounting needs, dealing with historic preservation, renewable energy, opportunity zones, low-income tax credits, new market tax credits, state tax credits, and other areas. And also to our audience, please take a moment to subscribe to Tax Credit Tuesday on your favorite podcast platforms. That way you'll be sure not to miss an episode. And I will include both Brent and Amanda's contact information in today's show notes. So now we're going to turn to our off mic section, and I get to ask a couple of fun off-topic questions to each of you to share your wisdom beyond capital magnet fund applications. And one of my favorite questions is to ask my guests something that they wish they knew, that they know now that they wish they knew at the start of their career. And Amanda, I'll let you go first on this question. I'll let Brent go first on the next question.
Sure. I would say one is having really, really good organization skills. Like, I think I would have wished early on, just in our profession, there's a lot of things you're juggling, a lot of different things. And so having like a really good organization structure to keep track of everything, I feel like that probably early on in my career took me longer to get to realize how important that really was. And I think even as I started earlier on my career, somebody told me one time, which I thought was such excellent advice, is that you're only as good as the team below you. And so I think like learning how to really get a good team below you, like realizing that you can never be as successful if the people behind you can't be there to help you. And so those are definitely things that, looking back, realized if I would have thought about that and realized how important some of those things are, would have been a lot easier starting, I'd say.
Thank you, Amanda. Brent?
Yeah. So mine is more on the personal side. I think have kids early. And like, like I'm 46 and I have like a 3-year-old. Anyway, it's cool. I mean, I wouldn't change her for the world, but I would be,
Very good. No, there's a lot to be said for having children so early in your career. My other question is, what's a tip for adjusting to changes in your profession? Brent?
Yeah. So the only constant in life is change. So, and most people know that, but you just got to be able to roll with the punches. I think what Amanda said is really essential. Being organized and having your disposal enables you to be able to roll with those punches. But my tip is, just try not to stress about it. The more you stress about it, it's more time it's taking you to get to the next step. So just roll with the punches.
Very Buddhist theology about the impermanence of life.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say mine's a lot close to his, whereas like being very patient, and like Brent said, that's exactly what I was writing down, was that change is always gonna happen. Like it just happens, and getting all upset or just like be patient, calm down, like you said, roll with the changes, they're gonna happen. But I just think having a lot of patience and just learning how to deal with that, and definitely not let the stress of changes or anything bother you as much. I always tell my people, especially when you're working in our industry, I always tell even my managers, like, you can be stressed on the inside, but don't project the stress out as much as you can. Just keep it internal, because we don't want to project it off to everybody else to be as stressed as we are. But inside you can be stressed as can be, but just try to not project it all the time. So those are tips I think I use with just all the changes we have. But
like, you're supposed to project it upwards, not downward, right?
Exactly. You project it upwards. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. It's like,
yeah. You can commiserate with the people at your level, just not projecting down. Yeah.
So don't let them see you sweat.
Yes, that is it. That is it.
Oh, that's very, very good advice, but also it doesn't multiply that way.
No. Yeah.
So thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Brent. And to our listeners, I'm Mike Novogradac. Thanks for listening.
This weekly podcast has been brought to you by Novogradac & Company, LLP. Archived podcasts are available online at www.novoco.com/podcast or by subscribing to the Tax Credit Tuesday podcast in iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Radio Public. You can find related links referenced in this podcast on our website at www.novoco.com/podcast. Novogradac & Company, LLP is a national certified public accounting and consulting firm with offices nationwide. Learn more about our professional services at www.novoco.com.